In the world of international politics, money is power, and Iran is wielding it to reshape the Middle East. U.S. officials claim Iran has funneled about $1 billion to Hezbollah this year, despite its own economic crisis. For Tehran, funding proxies like Hezbollah is a top foreign policy priority, a way to challenge rivals and extend its reach. The U.S. sees this as a direct threat to regional stability and American interests, arguing that the money fuels conflict and empowers a group they label as terrorists. Iran's financial support allows Hezbollah to maintain its arsenal, pay fighters, and run social programs that cement its power in Lebanon. Meanwhile, ordinary Iranians face soaring inflation and unemployment, fueling anger as their government spends billions abroad. This disconnect between regime priorities and public needs is driving unrest across Iran. The U.S. and its allies are now focused on severing this financial lifeline, aiming to weaken Hezbollah by targeting its funding. The battle over this billion-dollar pipeline is now central to the struggle for the Middle East's future. To grasp the impact of Iran's billion-dollar payment, you need to understand Hezbollah. Formed in Lebanon in the 1980s with Iranian support, Hezbollah has grown from a militia into a dominant political and military force. It holds seats in Lebanon's parliament and commands a military wing stronger than the national army. Hezbollah's mission: resist Israeli influence and advance Iran's regional ambitions. As Iran's key proxy, Hezbollah lets Tehran challenge Israel, Saudi Arabia, and the U.S. without direct confrontation. Beyond warfare, Hezbollah runs schools, hospitals, and charities, building deep roots in Lebanon's Shia community. This dual role as both armed group and social provider makes it hard to isolate without hurting ordinary Lebanese. Iran's funding is the lifeblood of Hezbollah's operations, paying fighters, buying weapons, and sustaining its social programs. Without Tehran's cash, Hezbollah's power would shrink dramatically. For the U.S. and its allies, cutting this funding is the surest way to curb both Hezbollah and Iran's influence. While Iran spends billions abroad, its own economy is in freefall. Sanctions, corruption, and mismanagement have devastated the rial and sent inflation soaring. Ordinary Iranians struggle to afford food and medicine, while protests erupt over unpaid wages and worthless pensions. Many citizens are outraged that their government prioritizes funding groups like Hezbollah over fixing the economy. This anger is fueling a crisis of legitimacy for the regime, as more Iranians question their leader's priorities. The leadership faces a stark choice: continue its costly foreign policy or address the growing unrest at home. So far, Tehran has chosen to double down on its regional ambitions. But as protests mount, the regime's gamble could push Iran closer to a breaking point. Amid rising tensions, President Trump met with President Shirin Prindent, representing a coalition of nations alarmed by Iran's actions. Their White House summit was more than symbolic. It was a strategic move to confront Iran's aggression and cut off funding to groups like Hezbollah. The meeting followed U.S. intelligence confirming the billion-dollar transfer, intensifying calls for action. Trump declared Iran's support for terror a disgrace, while Shyrin called for international unity and decisive measures. Both leaders stressed that the time for talk was over. Action was needed to halt Iran's destabilizing influence. The summit aimed to build a global coalition, not just to condemn Iran, but to coordinate a concrete plan to stop its financial support for proxies. The image of Trump and Shyrin side by side sent a clear message. The world's leading powers were united against Tehran's tactics. This meeting marked a turning point in the campaign to isolate Iran. It was a signal that the U.S. would not act alone, and that others were ready to join the fight. The resolve on display at the White House set the stage for a new phase in the effort to hold Iran accountable. Inside the Oval Office, Trump and Shirin moved from rhetoric to action. Intelligence briefings revealed Iran's complex web of shell companies and money transfers used to fund Hezbollah. Trump pushed for immediate results, considering aggressive measures beyond traditional sanctions, like targeting banks that enable Iran's transactions. The goal: make it too risky for any institution to help move Iranian money. Shirin proposed a joint task force to track and intercept Iranian cash, combining intelligence from allied nations. The plan escalated the pressure campaign with new sanctions, covert actions, and a public campaign exposing Iran's corruption. By the meeting's end, a united strategy had emerged. a full-scale financial war on Hezbollah and its Iranian backers. The billion-dollar pipeline was now in the crosshairs of a determined international coalition. The U.S. relies on economic sanctions as its main weapon against Iran and Hezbollah. The Treasury Department blacklists individuals, companies, and entire sectors, freezing assets and cutting them off from the global financial system. These sanctions have global reach. Banks and businesses worldwide avoid Iran to protect their access to U.S. markets. The U.S. has relentlessly targeted Hezbollah's financial network, sanctioning financiers and front companies to choke off revenue. Sanctions also hit Iran's oil sector, slashing its main source of income and limiting funds for proxies like Hezbollah. The logic, less money for Iran, means less money for destabilizing activities. After the White House summit, the U.S. signaled an even tougher approach, focusing on secondary sanctions that target non-American entities aiding Iran. This forces global businesses to choose between the U.S. and Iran's illicit networks. The strategy aims to isolate Iran and Hezbollah from the world economy. It's a powerful tool in the campaign to contain Tehran's influence. Despite intense pressure, Iran has mastered the art of evasion. The regime uses front companies, shell corporations, and informal money transfer systems to move funds undetected. Transactions are routed through countries with weak banking oversight, making the money trail nearly impossible to follow. Iran relies on the Hawala network, where cash is transferred informally across borders, bypassing traditional banks. When one smuggling route is blocked, Iran quickly adapts, shifting operations to new locations like Yemen's coast. The regime even spoofs GPS signals on oil tankers to hide illicit sales. U.S. and allied intelligence agencies face a constant challenge. As soon as one network is shut down, another emerges. Iran also finds new partners, importing missile components from countries willing to risk sanctions. This resourcefulness means sanctions alone aren't enough. Combating Iran's financial maneuvers requires relentless intelligence, diplomacy, and international cooperation. Iran's funding of Hezbollah is tied to a bigger fear: its nuclear ambitions. International watchdogs warn Iran has enriched enough uranium for multiple bombs, raising the stakes for the entire region. A nuclear-armed Iran could trigger an arms race, destabilizing the Middle East and threatening global security. The regime claims its program is peaceful, but its secrecy and defiance fuel deep suspicion. For Tehran, nuclear capability is the ultimate insurance policy. The U.S. and its allies see cutting off Hezbollah's funding as part of a broader effort to force Iran to negotiate on its nuclear and missile programs. The goal: prevent a regime that funds terrorism from acquiring the world's most dangerous weapons. The stakes couldn't be higher. The nightmare scenario of a nuclear Iran looms if containment fails. Iran's billion-dollar payment to Hezbollah is more than a financial story. It's the heart of the Middle East's central conflict. The region's future hangs in the balance: stability and progress, or conflict and arms races. For the U.S., stopping Iran's support for Hezbollah is a national security imperative. Hezbollah's global reach and history of attacks make it a threat far beyond Lebanon. Containing Iran protects U.S. allies and ensures the free flow of commerce through vital waterways. For Iranians, the regime's foreign spending fuels a crisis of legitimacy and growing unrest. The question: will Iran change under pressure or double down and face greater isolation? The billion-dollar pipeline symbolizes Iran's determination to export its revolution and the world's resolve to push back. The White House summit marked a new phase in this long-term struggle. The outcome will shape whether the Middle East moves toward peace or remains locked in perpetual conflict.